everyone, in this video we are going to revise offences and penalties. See, first section which is covering penalties is section 122. Now 122 has various subsections plus 122(1) has 21 offences which are listed like obstructing an officer, not paying tax, invoice not being in accordance with the GST law, TDS non-payment, TCS non-payment, refund, erroneous refund claim, and a penalty is provided. They also talk about other than FMS penalty. It also talks about helpers or a person who abets any particular offense. What do you mean by abets? That means he encourages the other person to do an offense. So penalty is provided for that as well. Let's have a look from a small diagram. What are the various penalties applicable? See this. 122(1) lists down 21 offences. Some offences out of that is invoice being supplied without goods, TDS or TCS non-payment, goods being supplied without invoice, collecting an amount representing it as tax, ITC related offences, falsification of records, erroneous refund, and obstructing or stopping an officer. Penalty is 100% of the tax amount, or TDS not deposited, TCS not deposited, or erroneous refund, compared to 10,000, whichever is higher. 122(2) talks about FMS and other than FMS. For fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of fact, which is 100% or 10,000, whichever is higher. For other than FMS, 10% of the tax or 10,000, whichever is higher. Then 122(3) talks about various helpers or a person who obstructs, does not appear before the officer, or invoice is not in accordance with the rules. In such cases, penalty is 25,000. You will find that some offences might fall in 122(1), also 122(3). See, there is a overlapping in this. ऐसा हो सकता है कि एक offense दो section में cover हो, subsection में cover हो जाए. Then it's the discretion of the officer. First he has to choose specific, and thereafter अगर दोनों specific है तो it is left to the discretion of the officer. इसीलिए you will find that there are some overlapping. It could be 122(1) same offense, 122(2) का भी हो सकता है. But remember, these penalties one will apply. You cannot apply multiple penalties for the same offense. Yes? Okay. Information return. Say suppose does not furnish information return. RBI or SEBI or a taxable person who is required to furnish information return. If that is not submitted, 100 rupees per day, maximum 5,000. All these are CGST. All these are CGST. That means same amount CGST, same amount as GST. It will become double. Okay. If you don't furnish statistics, see, the commissioner has the power to call for statistics. And why is this statistics called? A simple reason for calling statistics is to find out where all tax evasion is taking place. In such cases, if you fail to furnish statistics, then there is a fine. It's not a penalty. It's a fine of 10,000 rupees. And if it's a continuing offense, meaning there have been reminders, still you have not been able to furnish statistics, 100 rupees per day, maximum 25,000. All this is CGST. And if there is no penalty for a particular offense, then kya lagega? General penalty. And general penalty is 25,000. Are you clear with this? Yes. So this is the penalty provisions which you study. 126. 126 provides a relief. If there is a minor breach, yaad rakhna, minor breach is less than 5,000. If there is a minor breach that is for less than 5,000 rupees, in that case, officer can waive off that penalty. Minor breach, officer will not. Or some documentations which have been missed out. Some very small offences where there is no harm which is caused to the revenue. In such cases, he can grant a relief under 126. Remember this, less than 5,000. Institute troubles us with this. Less than 5,000, not exactly 5,000. Thereafter, government can waive off any of these penalties. They have the power under section 128. Then we have an important discussion on 129. See, what is 129? This is penalty in case goods in transit are searched and the documentations are not available. Like e-way bill is not available. In such cases, 129 penalty will be applicable. Now 129 is very harsh. What happens is, first they will inspect the vehicle, inspect the documents. If documents are not in order, in that case, they will levy a penalty. Varies. If the person comes forward, then there is a separate penalty. If he does not come forward, then there is a separate penalty. If he comes forward, penalty is 100% of the tax. If he does not come forward, penalty is 50% of the value. So 50% of the value in CGST, 50% of the value in SGST, that means penalty would be 100% of the value minus tax paid. Obviously, whatever tax he has paid, that will be subtracted. So any person who is carrying goods without e-way bill and it is searched during transit, he will have to pay a tax, he will have to pay penalty. And penalty, if he comes forward, 100%. If he does not come forward, then 50% of the value minus the tax paid thereon. Clear with this? And the officer has to pass an order within 14 days in such cases. If there is exempted goods, then the penalty is much lower. Let's have a look at 129 penalty. This is the entire penalty under section 129. See, this vehicle was carrying goods without invoice and e-way bill. Thereafter, it is inspected by proper officer, detained and seizure done. Thereafter, a seizure order was passed. This is non-appealable. If he comes forward, then 100% of the tax. If he does not come forward, then 50% of the value minus tax paid. Because obviously he is paying the tax as well, right? And exempted goods, 2% if he comes forward or 25,000, whichever is lower. This is the only place in the law which you find whichever is lower in penalty provision. Be very careful. 2% of the value or 25,000, whichever is lower. Whenever there is an amount, you will have to double it for C and S. But when there is a percentage of tax, when there is a percentage of tax, then don't double it. Because 2% of CGST, 2% of SGST. Yes? Okay. Whenever it's value, yeah, you will have to double it because value would be obviously double. Clear? Yes. And for exempted goods, if it does not come forward, then it is 5% of the value or 25,000, whichever is lower. Yes. Finally, he has to pass an order. Be very careful. Can you get the goods released while the proceedings are going on? The answer is yes. Either you can pay that tax and penalty or you can furnish a security for that tax and penalty and goods would be provisionally released. Yes? Okay. What happens after this order is passed? Thereafter, they might confiscate the goods. If you don't pay these amounts, goods will be confiscated. Goods will be confiscated meaning thereafter ownership has transferred to government. And once ownership passes to government, can you get back the goods? The answer is yes, by paying a redemption fine. Now redemption fine comes from section 130. And redemption fine, the law says fine plus penalty under section 122 shall not be less than penalty under section 129. You will have to solve this equation. Remember this equation. The law says fine plus penalty under section 122 shall not be less than penalty under section 129. Penalty under section 129 we have already seen this or this. 122 penalty is 100% of the tax in case it's a FMS case. Obviously these will be FMS cases, fraud, willful misstatement and suppression. So this is the minimum fine. Sir, what is the maximum fine? Maximum fine is market value of the goods minus tax. Market value of the goods minus tax. That's the maximum fine. Clear with this? So this is section 130 where, remember one thing, section 130 is much wider. See, section 130 confiscation can happen for goods in transit. It can also happen in case for other than goods in transit, like a normal search which is carried out on the business premise. In such cases also, goods will be confiscated, and thereafter if you want to release it, this is the minimum fine, this is the maximum fine. Clear with this? So this is section 130. Now, let's talk about offences. That means jail term. Can there be a jail term? Can there be imprisonment? Yes, section 132 deals with such cases. Now, let me show you a small story on this. I have a friend, Mr. A. Mr. A has a factory. He is supplying goods without invoice. Goods being supplied without invoice. Mr. B is supplying invoice without supplying goods. That means just for the other person to take ITC. Mr. C is taking ITC on Mr. B's invoice. Is again a fraudster. Mr. D has collected GST but has not paid to government for 3 months. In such cases, he is also a fraudster. E does export fraudulently. F submits false records. G has obstructed the officer. H is a helper, that is transporter of goods. I is a helper, commission agent who helps all of these transactions happen. So he is a helper who provides a service, while transporter helps in transporting the goods. J tampers with all the documents. K never gives information to officer. And lastly, L is the person who abets all of this, encourages all of this. Now, all these offences are listed in section 132 in this order: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. You'll find it in the same order. First, goods without invoice, invoice without goods, ITC not taken, collects GST but does not pay, export fraudulently, false records. Now, in such cases, can there be a prosecution? The answer is yes. You have to check the tax evaded or ITC fraudulently claimed. If it is more than 1 crore but up to 2 crore, more than 1 crore but up to 2 crore, imprisonment can be for 1 year. 2 crore minus 1 crore. If it is more than 2 crore but up to 5 crore, 3 years of imprisonment. 3 years of imprisonment, very clearly provided, 5 minus 2, that is 3 years. More than 5 crore, 5 years. And in all the 3 cases, minimum 6 months. So 5 crore minus 0, obviously 5. So 1 to 2, 1 year. 2 to 5, 3 years. More than 5, 5 years of imprisonment. Minimum 6 months. Is arrest possible? Arrest under section 69 of CGST Act 2017 is permissible only if the amount exceeds 2 crore. That's why you see a tick only in these two. And which is this arrest? This is a preventive arrest, so that the other person does not run away. This is not arrest after giving imprisonment. This is arrest which is a preventive arrest. What is the type of offense? Now, remember one thing. Which is more harsh? Non-cognizable bailable or cognizable and non-bailable? Sir, obviously cognizable and non-bailable. So, whenever there is a small crime, government regards it as below 5 crore. If there is a small crime that is below 5 crore or up to 5 crore, in all such cases it is non-cognizable and bailable. If it is for more than 5 crore, in that case only A, B, C, D is cognizable and non-bailable. Only A, B, C, D is cognizable and non-bailable. A, goods without invoice, invoice without goods, ITC, and collects GST but does not pay it to government for 3 months. Any subsequent offense of any of this will be having the imprisonment of 5 years, minimum 6 months. And remember, this is cognizable and non-bailable. Okay, clear with this? Yes. So this is how you can remember all these provisions. Plus, for false records, the jail terms is 6 months, obstructing an officer 6 months, tampers with evidence 6 months. For these 3 offences, it is 6 months. Now, instead of going to the jail, can a person pay an amount and come out? Yes, there is an option available for that as well. It's called as compounding of offences. See, compounding of offences is permitted once for A to F crimes. A to F. You can see A to F? Yes, till F. A to F. Once it is permitted. Second time it will not be given. It's allowed only once. Any person who abets means encourages, even that A to F, he is allowed once. Second time he is not allowed. Then, what about a case which is an offence under any other law? If it is an offence under any other law, in that case, this compounding is not allowed. Plus, if the person is already convicted under this act, that is under GST Act by a court, in that case also, compounding of offence is not allowed. Plus, you can see the circled one, G, J and K. Yes, G, J and K. These three, G, J and K. Obstructs an officer, tampers and information not submitted. These three will never be allowed compounding of offences. Now, when we talk about compounding of offences, you need to also be very clear with the amount which you pay, not offences. What is the amount which is required to be paid? The amount which is required, so in any case of offences, the penalty or the pay which you have to pay is defined. Now the compounding amount which you have to pay is 50% of the tax or 10,000, whichever is higher. This is the minimum. Minimum being 50% of the tax or 10,000, whichever is higher. What's the maximum? The maximum is 150% of the tax or 30,000, whichever is higher. And who would determine this? Obviously, this will be determined by the proper officer. It's his discretion not to go below the minimum and not to go below or beyond the maximum. So, what have we concluded with? First, we saw this particular thing. 122 to 125 and 126, 128. 129, which talks about a case of goods in transit being penalty applicable in case the documents are not carried. 130 talks about redemption fine, minimum and maximum is provided. And finally, we have 132, which talks about various offences. 69 talks about arrest, and 138, which talks about compounding of offences. Clear with this? Yes, this diagram will help you one day before the examination. See you all.